Have you ever met someone who makes the same mistake again and again, but still believes they are the smartest person in the room? They interrupt people, jump to conclusions, ignore advice, blame everyone else, and then act confused when life keeps giving them the same results. At first, it may look like confidence or stubbornness, but when you look closer, psychology suggests that certain everyday habits can quietly reveal a deeper problem: poor thinking ability. This does not mean someone is unintelligent just because they make mistakes. Everyone has bad days. Everyone reacts emotionally sometimes. And IQ is not the only measure of a person's worth. But the way someone thinks, learns, reacts, and handles reality can reveal a lot about how their mind works. One of the first everyday habits that may reveal low IQ is speaking before thinking. Some people do not process information before they respond. They hear one sentence, react immediately, and assume they understand the entire situation. They interrupt halfway through an explanation, give opinions without context, and answer questions they did not fully listen to. Intelligent people usually pause. They take in information. They ask questions. They understand that the first thought in their mind is not always the best thought. But people with poor reasoning skills often treat their first reaction as the final truth. They do not stop to ask, "Do I actually understand this?" They just speak. And the louder they speak, the more obvious it becomes that they are only reacting quickly. Another habit is refusing to ask questions. Curious people ask questions because they want to understand. They are not embarrassed to say, "I don't know." In fact, that is often what makes them intelligent. They know that not knowing something is not shameful. Pretending to know everything is. But people with low thinking ability often see questions as weakness. They would rather guess, assume, or stay wrong than admit they need clarification. So instead of asking, they make things up. Instead of learning, they protect their ego. A person who does not know something can still learn. But a person who refuses to ask questions stays trapped inside the limits of their own mind. A third habit is believing every simple answer. The world is complicated. People are complicated. Problems are complicated. But some people cannot handle complexity, so they reduce everything into basic explanations. If someone is successful, they must be lucky. If someone disagrees, they must be stupid. If one person from a group does something wrong, then the entire group must be bad. This is not intelligence. This is mental shortcuts replacing real thought. Instead of exploring nuance, these people look for the easiest explanation that protects their existing beliefs. They do not want the truth. They want something simple enough to make them feel certain. Intelligent people can say, "This may be partly true, but there is more to the story." Low-level thinkers struggle with that. They want one villain, one answer, one label, and one conclusion. Another clear habit is getting angry when corrected. One of the clearest signs of poor thinking is how someone reacts when they are wrong. A thoughtful person may feel embarrassed, but they eventually adjust. They understand that being corrected is not an attack. It is an opportunity to improve. But someone with low self-awareness often reacts as if correction is humiliation. They become defensive. They raise their voice. They change the subject. They attack the person instead of addressing the point. Why? Because their ego is stronger than their desire to learn. This is why some people never grow. They are not lacking information. They are rejecting it. Every correction feels like a threat, so they fight the truth instead of using it. Another everyday habit is copying opinions without understanding them. Some people do not form beliefs. They collect them. They hear something online, repeat it to friends, and act like it is their own original thought. But when you ask them to explain it, everything falls apart. They cannot define the terms. They cannot explain the logic. They cannot defend the idea without repeating the same sentence again and again. This habit reveals a lack of independent thinking. Intelligent people may learn from others, but they still process the idea. They test it. They question it. Low-level thinkers often skip that step. They borrow confidence from other people because they have not built understanding inside themselves. They do not know why they believe what they believe. They only know that it feels good to sound certain. Another habit that may reveal poor thinking is blaming everything except themselves. Some people live as if nothing is ever their responsibility. If they fail, it is because someone hated them. If they lose an opportunity, it is because the world is unfair. If a relationship falls apart, it is entirely the other person's fault. They never ask, "What could I have done differently?" Growth requires self-reflection. You cannot improve what you refuse to examine. Intelligent people are usually willing to study their own mistakes even when it is uncomfortable. They may not enjoy criticism, but they know it contains useful information. People with poor thinking patterns avoid that discomfort. They would rather blame luck, society, friends, family, teachers, bosses, or strangers than face one painful possibility. Maybe their own choices helped create the problem, and as long as they keep blaming everything outside themselves, they remain stuck. Finally, One of the strongest habits is needing to always be right. There is a huge difference between wanting the truth and wanting to win. Intelligent people care about accuracy. If they discover they are wrong, they update their thinking. They understand that changing your mind is not weakness. It is evidence that your mind still works. But low-level thinkers often treat every conversation like a battle. They do not listen to understand. They listen to respond. They do not care whether the idea is true. They care whether they look dominant. So they twist words, deny obvious facts, move the goalpost, and keep arguing long after the point is lost. Not because they have strong logic, but because admitting they are wrong feels emotionally impossible. And this may be the deepest pattern behind all 7 habits. Low intelligence is not always loud, but insecurity often is. The person who cannot ask questions, cannot handle correction, cannot accept complexity, and cannot take responsibility is usually protecting a fragile ego from reality. The truth is, these habits do not prove someone has a low IQ, but they do reveal something important about how a person thinks. Intelligence is not just about grades, vocabulary, or test scores. It is about curiosity, flexibility, self-control, humility, the ability to learn from mistakes, the courage to say, maybe I was wrong. And here is the uncomfortable part. The people who need this lesson the most are often the least likely to recognize themselves in it. So instead of only thinking about someone else while watching this, ask yourself, do I ever react before thinking? Do I ever reject correction because it hurts my pride? Do I ever defend an opinion I have not truly examined? Because the moment you can question your own mind, you are already doing something deeply intelligent. Real intelligence is not pretending to know everything. Real intelligence is staying open enough to keep learning.